apologies. I know I apologize in a lot of my videos, but I think it's very necessary in this case. Apologies in advance for the ear rape that is inevitably going to come, because I've had the flu almost over a week now. It's been getting better. I'm definitely feeling better than I was a few days ago when I just couldn't get out of bed. You will inevitably hear probably me sniffling, and I mean, I'll try to keep coughing and stuff out of the video. But yeah. But I do have good news. I did get into one of the schools I applied for. I'm still waiting for all the other schools. I got into University of Miami of Ohio on scholarship, which is good. They were one of my top picks. I also started Botox injections today, and hopefully those should help with my migraines. So yeah, and I'm starting school up again, which means I'm going to be very busy, and probably won't have a lot of time for videos. But anyway, all those updates out of the way, I'm gonna respond today to Ben Shapiro. Now, I haven't done any videos on Ben Shapiro. Some people have been asking for me to do a video on Ben Shapiro or Steven Crowder, or one of those people who kind of talk about conservative talking points. And I have responded to those kind of people in the past. I've talked about Hunter Avallone to some extent, although I did sort of, those videos that I made were more early on, and I kind of wish I'd made better videos about him, and I got a lot of hate on my abortion video for him, but that's another topic. What else? I've of course done a ton of PragerU videos, which this is a PragerU video. But in general, just those big names I haven't done a lot of discussion about, so this is going to be my first big name, I guess, conservative talking points. And to be clear, I have nothing against conservatives in general. I just mostly see them as people I disagree with. But I do have a problem with ideologues, and I definitely see Ben Shapiro as an ideologue. Now, you might have already seen a response to this video before, and there was also a whole controversy with Ben Shapiro and Rosie O'Donnell on Twitter and all this crazy stuff, which I don't want to get into. But you might have seen a response to this particular video already multiple times, because the amazing atheist, or TJ Kirk, already did a response to it, and I thought his response was pretty good, and he already said a lot of points that I'm probably already going to make. But I don't think he said some particular points that I want to say. And also, just a lot of the stuff that Ben Shapiro was talking about, I've been thinking about, and I want to formulate my response to that.
Imagine a group of activists so powerful that they could beam their propaganda directly into your brain. Now also imagine that they're so sophisticated, they actually get you to pay them to do it.
Well, first of all, nobody beams propaganda in your brain. You may be brainwashed eventually to do something, but you've already been conditioned to accept it. It doesn't automatically go in your brain. See, ideologues, they have this propensity to believe that people are like sheep. Like, literally, people are like sheep. And that they just automatically believe whatever they hear. And, also, with PragerU, with Ben Shapiro, I mean, it's not quite, because it's free. But you're just one step away. Because if people paid for your content, you would be a propaganda machine like that.
Unfortunately, you don't have to imagine it. It's real. It's Hollywood.
So Hollywood makes all kinds of movies from different political perspectives, different political satire, and even tons of movies that don't have anything to do with politics. Surprise!
As big as the internet has become, Hollywood, and here I'm talking specifically about television, is still king.
Even if you're talking about television, the same rule still applies.
Not only does it reach hundreds of millions of people with its messaging, it embeds that messaging in seemingly innocuous stories.
Oh, they're subliminal stories. See, they're things like where you don't know what it is, but it really is. It's kind of like a microaggression.
Stories that distract us from the hardships of daily life.
Exactly. They distract us from the hardships of daily life. You know, like they're supposed to make us not think about politics. You know, not the other way around. This is so conspiratorial.
Stories that make us feel good, compassionate, and decent. We watch TV, in other words, because we like it. And just as Americans didn't think much about the carcinogens in the cigarettes they smoked for decades, most Americans don't think much about the toxic politics in the television they watch.
That's by no means the same analogy. The reason why people didn't think about the carcinogens in cigarettes were because they just didn't know. And the reason they didn't know was because cigarette companies were intentionally trying to cover it up. What he's claiming is that the same thing is going on with Hollywood, is that Hollywood doesn't want to cover their hidden political messages. And I'm assuming what he's talking about, their hidden political messages, is because a lot of people in Hollywood happen to be liberal. But it's not like they're trying to cover that up. What are you talking about?
But those who create that content do. They spin out hour after hour of slickly produced left-wing propaganda, and they give themselves awards for doing it.
Oh yeah, you know, they don't put any effort into it because they want to make art, they want to make entertainment, they want to really take pride in their work. No, they just want to make propaganda. What? And they give themselves awards for doing it. Like those awards. Now, I do have problems with things like the Oscars, not for the reasons SJWs do. I have problems with those awards for different reasons, which I'm a big film buff, and I could talk about those, you know, in a different context. But anyway, look, he's acting like, oh, those awards, they're so terrible, like they're just self-congratulatory, which is funny because that's kind of like what the SJWs talk about, like, oh, they're only for white people and men. How is this not SJW tactics just for right-wingers? This is the problem I have with Ben Shapiro, and this is what a lot of people have been pointing out.
They applaud each other's courage, even though all their friends think exactly as they do.
Okay, he does kind of have a point with a lot of Hollywood people thinking similarly, but there are lots of people who don't think like that. There are lots of conservative Hollywood people. It's not a total hive mind, but of course he doesn't take that into account.
I spoke with nearly 100 members of the Hollywood community when I wrote my book, Primetime Propaganda, and many of them openly admitted they inserted social justice messages into their shows.
Social justice messages, okay. So, first of all, what he thinks social justice is and what other people think social justice is may differ. Now, maybe to a social justice warrior, and what the social justice is to him might mean the same, like just inane, meaningless stuff, that virtue signaling, basically, and even harmful stuff. But social justice to somebody else may mean legitimate activism, and they might not know about the harms of social justice warriors. So there might be a miscommunication there. Second of all, he only interviewed 100 people, and for all we know, they could have been not randomly picked. And who did he interview? I want to know. Like, did he interview directors, actors, you know, cinematographers, people doing lighting, more kind of crew-related people? Like, who did he interview? Because there's all sorts of people in Hollywood, and not to mention, like, there's so many people in indie films. I mean, obviously he's talking more in Hollywood. He's not talking in people outside of Hollywood. But, like, there's so much diversity within that, and he's acting like it's all the same.
How they do it is both clever and effective.
I'm sorry. Just laughing so hard.
Hollywood writers, producers, directors, actors create characters we keep wanting to spend time with, then have those characters act in ways most of us would judge wrong.
Characters we want to spend time with, and then characters in ways that we want to judge wrong. So is he talking about villains that people like? Okay, what is his point here?
Then, in effect, they ask us a question. Isn't it really okay that Rachel from Friends decided to have a baby without first marrying Ross?
Okay, so some Hollywood people, you know, ask a lot of moral questions in a movie. That's, yeah, like what a lot of movies about asking moral questions. I mean, some are like pure entertainment, like comedy or something. But some do ask moral questions, like he brought up in Friends, which is a horrible example. That's a sitcom. That's a terrible sitcom. But, and like, why did he bring up the example of sex before marriage? Well, of course he did, because look, he's a major traditionalist. I mean, sure, some bring up moral questions and put you in that situation. Like, what would you do? So what?
After all, you like Ross and you like Rachel. How can what they do be bad?
Who cares? The question is, like, what would you do in that situation, and do you think that's wrong? and it actually adds their character. In that case, it's not like how can what they do be bad and trying to justify sex before marriage. Not that there's anything wrong with sex before marriage. But say that, there are people that find problem with sex before marriage. It's saying like, oh, it's adding more depth to their character, it's adding more nuance to their characters, it's not seeing their characters as all good or all bad. It's saying, like, oh, here's, because these characters they have faults, they can do bad things, it adds more nuance to their character, don't you see? That's how character development works. If they're all good or they're all bad, they're not interesting. He seems like to think that these characters have to be all good or all bad.
It hasn't always been this way.
Oh no, it hasn't always been this way. Let's go back to like the 1950s or what.
For decades, Hollywood promoted traditional American values. That changed, as did so much else in the late 1960s and 70s.
I called it. And traditional American values, okay. Like, how do you define traditional American values? Because the values like that are always changing. I guarantee you, because he says it all changed in the 1950s. I guarantee you things were different in the 20s than they were in the 50s. Not just in cinema, but just everywhere. Like, the fact that, like, he thinks that it's, like, it was always the same at one point. Like, things were never the same at any point. What are you talking about? Culture is always changing. And honestly, do you want things to be the same that they were in the 1950s? Like, back when we still had a lot of the, I think we still had polio and shit, and women still, had legitimate restrictions on their rights. Black people were still segregated. Like, do you still want to live in that world? I mean, I'm sure there are still some good things about it, but really, you prefer that today?
When Hollywood stopped celebrating American values and started transforming them.
I mean, I doubt that was true. Hollywood has always, film always reflects changing culture, not the other way around. So, like I said, I'm sure film in the 1920s was way different, notwithstanding, obviously, the technical stuff like silent film, than film in the 1950s, because the culture was different. So the fact that he's saying, like, oh, there's this huge culture shift. I mean, sure, there was actually a big cultural shift between the 1950s and the 1960s and 70s. But, the fact that he's just going at that turning point and not any other turning point is weird.
In the early 1970s, abortion was a hotly contested issue. A year before the Roe v. Wade Supreme Court case, the top-rated TV sitcom Maude featured a storyline in which the title character of the show has an abortion. The LA Times described it as a watershed moment in TV history. Why? Well, because it removed the stigma of abortion.
So, first of all, I don't know if you noticed. I have no idea because I'm not familiar with the show Maude, but they showed like a little feminist. I don't know if Maude is supposed to have a feminist symbol or if PragerU just added that in graphics. I just thought that was funny. Anyway, he's also misinterpreting what a watershed moment in TV history means. A watershed moment in TV history does not mean it transformed culture, necessarily. A watershed moment in TV history means that it's dramatic for TV history. Like, I'm not actually that familiar with television, but say when a show like, which he might very much like because it's a very traditional TV show, like the Andy Griffith Show was released. That is a major TV show that people love and remember. That might be considered a watershed TV show because people love and remember that show and it's considered classic. I mean, maybe not necessarily like it was a huge thing at the time, but you get my point. It's considered something in that history, in that particular history of TV or history of cinema, not overall cultural history. He's thinking that they mean when they refer to that show as overall cultural history. The reason why it was considered a watershed moment in TV history was because abortion hadn't really been talked about on TV before. That was a big thing at the time. Kind of like in Star Trek, the first widely known about interracial kiss. I know people like me in the comments saying it wasn't the first interracial kiss. But, you know, it was like a big thing at the time. So he's misinterpreting what it means. He thinks like all of culture dramatically changed after that moment. No, it was just TV, at least at the time, was changed a lot because abortion had not really been talked about, or at least publicly talked about until that show. I know I'm kind of rambling, but he's misinterpreting that.
Millions of Americans sitting in their living rooms saw a beloved character do something they did not approve of, and they felt sympathy.
No, it's not necessarily that they didn't approve of it. I mean, it depends, obviously, if you're pro-life or pro-choice. It's just that there was a big controversial issue. That because it was a big controversial issue, had not really been talked about on TV. And so that was a big thing to finally have that been talked about, whether you're for or against it.
Something similar happened in the early 2000s. Vice President Joe Biden was right when he said that Will and Grace had a major impact on how Americans think about same-sex marriage.
I honestly don't really care about Will and Grace. I know they're revamping it or whatever, and I saw the trailers for it. It looks stupid, but I think it's, again, a similar thing. It was kind of the first TV show, or at least the first popular TV show to really talk about gay issues or gay people. And that's why it was a big thing. Not because it really changed people's opinions. I mean, it might have changed some people's opinions, but again, he's misinterpreting that. He's thinking, oh, it was the first thing to talk about gay marriage or gay people. Therefore, it must have changed people's opinions of gay people. No, it was a big thing because it was the first thing to really talk about that. Not because it wasn't a big thing because it really changed people's culture on that. He's thinking that TV affects culture, not that culture affects TV. It's funny because, again, like he was implying with the sex before marriage thing, he's implying that gay marriage is wrong. What's wrong with those things, Ben? What is wrong?
Before the hit NBC show, though most Americans had a live and let live attitude toward private sexual behavior, few supported the idea of men marrying men or women marrying women.
What is wrong with the live and let live? I thought you were for individual freedoms, Ben. Isn't that kind of what a lot of conservatives support? Individual freedoms. They're like, I mean, not knocking this, but they're like, don't take away my freedoms. What about people's freedoms to be gay?
But seeing the charming and funny Will Truman live his life week after week paved the way for a much wider acceptance of same-sex marriage. Current shows like Orange is the New Black and Transparent are trying to effect the same change on the issue of transgenderism.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. So, Ben is very famously quoting saying, facts don't care about your feelings, in reference to trying to invalidate trans people, or specifically trans people transitioning. And he said this to a transgender woman who was not a very nice person either, who violently threatened him. So I don't think Ben likes trans people very much. Or at least doesn't want them to transition. Yeah, and so now he's like, oh, the TV is making them trans. We can't allow this.
You may think these are all good things, or that some are and some aren't. That's not my point. My point is that Hollywood has had a tremendous influence on our culture.
No, it's the other way around, Ben. I mean, maybe to some extent, but mostly it's the other way around.
And that influence has been all to the left side of the political spectrum.
No, not necessarily. There's right-wingers in Hollywood, too. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. And here's the thing. Here's the main point that I wanted to make, which we made earlier. He's acting like Anita Sarkeesian. And I say this for every person who's like an anti-SJW takes it too far, who freaks out about movies or TV or what have you, video games. Why do you care? Why are you acting like Anita Sarkeesian? I thought we all criticized Anita Sarkeesian for freaking out too much about video games. It's video games. It's entertainment. It's a trivial thing. It's a trivial thing. Like, if we should be freaking out about entertainment, we should be freaking out because it's a bad movie. or because, like, they killed off our favorite character or something. We shouldn't be freaking out about the politics. The whole point of movies and stuff like that is to get away from the politics. And yeah, I don't like it. If it's like something that's obviously political and shoving it down your throat, I don't really like it. But even with that, I don't care that much. Like, why are you freaking out so much?
And it isn't just social issues. Chevy Chase liked to boast that he helped Jimmy Carter defeat Gerald Ford in 1976.
So, I'd have no idea the context. He just randomly said that. I mean, maybe Chevy Chase was joking. I have no idea. Ben's like, he may be right. What? But he's claiming, Shapiro's claiming, movies are helping sway elections. What evidence do you have to support that other than that random anecdote?
He may be right. Week after week on Saturday Night Live, Chase portrayed Ford, probably the most athletic president in American history, as a bumbling, uncoordinated idiot.
Of course, Shapiro has to be like, Ford was so athletic. Who cares? Who cares? Who cares about you virtue signaling about Ford or whatever? Especially because this is a president who's no longer president. Like it's irrelevant now. Who cares? It was Saturday Night Live. Their whole point was to make fun of people. He's bitching about parodies and sketches and stuff. My brain can't take this anymore.
In the early 2000s, Comedy Central had a show, That's My Bush, that openly mocked the 43rd president.
Okay, so they made fun of Bush. Bush, let me just point out, whether you loved him, whether you hated him, Bush is a man that said, family is what gives our nation hope, is where wings take dream. Bush is a person who said, we have a saying here in Texas, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, can't get fooled again. Whether you liked him or not, that's objectively funny. Like, we have a right to make fun of ridiculous people. And he's gonna bring up Trump. Same goes for Trump. Trump is just Bush on steroids.
And of course, Hollywood despises Donald Trump. From crime dramas to the late-night comedy shows, he's relentlessly ridiculed.
I already kind of said what I wanted to say about Trump. I mean, I will note that, like, everybody makes fun of Trump and they will not shut up about Trump. And, like, the media keeps going on about Trump and it's, So, I mean, I do kind of feel people there and, like, that people will not stop talking about Trump. But other than that, like, he's just ridiculous, whether you agree with his policies or not.
Somehow, Hollywood managed to take an 8-year hiatus from mocking presidents during the Obama years. But maybe that's just a coincidence.
Yeah, I will agree that a lot of these people are partisan and won't make fun of Obama. But a lot of people do make fun of Obama, like, what about, Key and Peele, who, you know, who did, like, the whole Obama anger translator and the whole, like, Obama gets high at parties and stuff. Like, what about that? Like, you don't take this stuff into consideration.
All of this programming has an effect. Scientific studies suggest that watching TV acts like a habit-forming drug. According to the market research firm Childwise, teenage boys spend 8 hours per day in front of screens.
The irony in this is that he's citing the exact same stuff and saying the exact same stuff that Philip Zimbardo and those people were saying in the video games video that I did. And those people were arguing for the other side, the Anita Sarkeesian type stuff, that were, like, arguing from the left-wing perspective. So, like, he's making the exact same argument just from a right-wing perspective. Like, oh my god, the TV and movies is gonna go in your head and make you think a certain way. And I can understand, like, if you're under a total dictatorship and you already believe in some sort of ideology under your government, that maybe it helps reinforce that, maybe, because you're already conditioned. But otherwise, I can definitely see what he's talking about in terms of the TV addiction thing. Yeah, you can definitely be addicted to watching TV or something like that. But that doesn't mean you're brainwashed by the messages or whatever.
Much of it consuming Hollywood propaganda.
I'm sorry, like, some of the stuff he's saying is so ridiculous.
Dedicated religious parents might expose their children to 2 hours a week of religious instruction. Hands-on parents might spend 30 minutes a day discussing essential values with their kids. Hollywood gets up to 40 hours a week.
Okay, just look at... Dedicated religious parents spend 2 hours of religious instruction. Somehow, that's not indoctrination in his eyes. But Hollywood is. Just think about that. Just think about that. And religion, I'm sorry, not to knock on religious people, but if you're a fundamentalist religious person, and you teach your kids your religion, like, from a very fundamentalist, devout way, and you teach that over and over again, and you're their parents, you are like a central figure in their life, and you teach them this is how the world works. This is how you should behave. That can act as indoctrination. That can act as serious propaganda to them. That can brainwash people. Like, look at ISIS. Look at the Westboro Baptist Church. All those groups. Of, like, seriously crazy, devout, religious people. Or even, you know, smaller groups of evangelical Christians or whatever. Somehow that's not religious indoctrination in his eyes. Well, ISIS probably is. And then hands-on parents, whatever that means. I don't think that would be indoctrination necessarily. That's just, I guess, parents spending time with their kids. And then just kids watching movies and TV. That's somehow more dangerous than, religious indoctrination. Yeah, sure. But that was basically the end of his video. So, yeah, that was his ridiculous rant about how the movies and the TV are hurting your kids. Yeah, go on, Anita. So sorry if I made, like, some of the same points that people made before. You know, this video was kind of all over the place. As you could tell, my brain is not very coherent today. He's acting exactly like an SJW on this. This is why I don't like the talking points people, the conservative talking points people, because they act exactly like SJWs. And often, I mean, not all of them, but a lot of them are not very accepting of trans people, or even LGBT people in general, as you showed from that video. But that's more or less my thoughts on people like Crowder and Shapiro. I mean, as for, like, individual conservatives, like, I subscribe to a lot of conservative YouTubers who don't think like these people, and they're nothing like these people, because they have a mind of their own. They don't just regurgitate what they think all conservatives are like, which is funny, kind of ironic, because they say, like, oh, we're not a hive mind, and then they're like, oh, but my conservative audience will like all this stuff, and then you find, like, all these people, all these conservatives who are accepting of LGBT people, who don't think that the media is out to get us, who don't believe all this crazy stuff, but just happen to be conservative. But yeah, that was the end of my long rant, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.
Feel the funk blast.